Well, tonight I'll look at some ritzy rides. A handful of taxpayer-funded cars are normally provided to some senior members of the Senate for them to use as they see fit. Here's the thing. The Democrats who are now in power don't want the free rides. Tonight we get the bottom line on these top-of-the-line cars because you paid for it. There they sit, deep in the bowels of the Empire State Plaza, a testament to indulgent spending. 5 expensive, now unused automobiles purchased by the Senate Republicans when they were in control of the Senate. Now that the Democrats have taken over this year, they don't want the cars.
I think when we talk about taxpayer-funded resources like cars, we have to be as efficient as possible. And just because it's been done in one way in the past doesn't mean it has to be that way in the future.
There are 2 Ford Taurus Limiteds, the top-of-the-line Taurus. There's a 2017 Ford Explorer Limited, again, top-of-the-line. Last year's model priced from $42,090. There is a 2017 Chevy Tahoe Premier, the top Tahoe. Last year's model starting at a whopping $62,200. You can almost buy 3 economy model sedans for that. And there is one other slightly older Tahoe. You paid for them, but no one is using them. These cars have clearly been sitting here for some time, untouched, undriven. The proof of that? The dust that has built up. Even members of the Republican conference, the conference that bought the cars, question the decision to buy the pricey rides. Have you ever had any concern with the Senate buying expensive Chevy Tahoe Premiers and Ford Explorer Limiteds?
I mean, I think, like anything else, it should be looked at as far as how much money is being spent.
Democrats don't want the cars in part because of the money spent and the optic of driving around in cars many constituents cannot afford. That sounds about right to Republican Senator Sue Serino from Dutchess County. Do you think senators should be driving around in taxpayer cars?
You're asking the girl that doesn't take a per diem and never did. So, you know, for me, it's a job, and we don't have, like I say, my constituents don't have any special privileges with, you know, getting paid to come back and forth to do their job. So I'm somebody that's the taxpayer dollars. You have to be very conscientious of that.
George Amador of Rotterdam is one more rank-and-file Republican senator who says he's glad the 5 cars we found are now grounded.
That's good. Save taxpayer money. Send them back. Don't buy any new ones. And you don't have all the members of the legislature drive their own car, just like I do.
Everything that we do, we have to be looking at it through a new lens, being conscious of the fact that this is taxpayers that are funding these activities. So we have to make sure that we're as efficient as possible. And they're being...
Now, 4 other previously purchased Senate cars are being used by members, one by Democrats, an SUV for the Majority Leader, Andrea Stewart Cousins, and 3 older model Tauruses requested by the 3 GOP leaders. But as for the Fab 5 sitting idle in that parking garage, the new Senate majority is looking at perhaps selling them or finding some other state government agency that could truly use them. We did get this from Senate Republicans when we asked why such expensive cars were purchased. They said many of the previous cars had been driven hundreds of thousands of miles and were in need of significant repairs. Now, again, that addresses why cars were purchased, but not why top-of-the-line cars were chosen. You've got to show up for your job, right? Well, that's not always the case with members of the New York State Assembly. I've obtained attendance records for the first 2 months of this year, and there are a few lawmakers who are often not on the job in Albany for some interesting reasons. We tracked them down because you paid for it. Thanks to a whopping pay raise, members of the New York State Assembly are now being paid $110,000 a year to be in Albany for 61 days this year. So why are some not showing up? Robin Schimminger, an Assembly member from Western New York, missed almost the entire month of January, absent for 6 of the first 7 sessions this year. He was frank about why he missed the first week.
I was not anticipating any activity here, and I did not make plans to attend.
But things were happening. Major election reforms were passed in that first week.
Well, you've been around a long time. You know in that first week, nothing happens. However, in this first week, which was the first week in the first 100 days of Andrew Cuomo's new administration, we sprung into action.
Then Schimminger missed the following week's 2-day session because of a delayed flight out of Buffalo.
The following week was the week of the infamous frozen jetway at the Buffalo airport when my plane could not take off in a timely way.
Other Western New York lawmakers did make it to Albany that week. Blair Horner is the legislative director of the New York Public Interest Research Group. How important is it for lawmakers to be here for session?
Well, it's a representative democracy, and it's hard to represent your constituents if you're not here.
2 members of the Assembly ran unsuccessfully for the office of New York City Public Advocate in a special election on February 26th. One was Assemblymember Danny O'Donnell. He missed all 3 session days in Albany the week of that election. Assemblymember Michael Blake was also running. He missed 5 days, including one right before the Assembly's vacation week and all 3 election week. His Twitter page full of photos of him in New York City while his colleagues were voting on issues in Albany.
And you had to miss days here because of running for office. Is that fair to your constituents?
Well, I think that you always have a balance of it all. You know, for our constituents, you think about in the public advocate race, they saw and knew that it was trying to help more people, including them. You know, and I think people are always understanding of that when you're trying to elevate the cause to help.
Then there is the case of David Gant of Rochester. He has missed all but 2 session days this year, absent 12 of the first 14 days. He battled kidney disease last year and missed almost all of last year, but he ran for office again in November, knowing what his health situation was. He won, but he has not been on the job.
It's hard to be an effective representative unless you're here representing your constituents.
Stripped of his chairmanship of the Assembly Transportation Committee, Gant is now listed as the chair of something called the Legislative Commission on Critical Transportation Choices. There is no sign that that commission has ever done anything. Its webpage simply says, no news at this time. And even though he does not come to Albany, Gant collects his $110,000 salary, and he double dips, getting his pension, estimated to be $72,000 a year. Gant's record is in stark contrast to his fellow Democrat David Buchwald. He has not missed a day all year.
Why do you think it's so important to be here for sessions?
Look, I think my constituents send me here to represent them. It is, although never easy to be away from your family, this is something that I get to do so that 130,000 residents of the 93rd Assembly District can go on with their lives, working on behalf of them.
We reached out to David Gant's office with our questions, but we never got any answers. Observers in Rochester say Gant has a long history of not talking to the media. The State Assembly announced to some fanfare 3 years ago that it would put cameras in its committee meetings so you can see the proceedings online. Just one problem. It's never happened. Now, I've obtained the recommendations from a task force that reported back to the full Assembly in March of 2016. It says right here and right there on your screen, make audio and video webcasts of committee meetings available on the Assembly website. And here, right here, is the press release from the Speaker, Carl Hastie. It says the Assembly will take immediate action to implement the recommendations and refers to the importance of transparency and public participation. But since that announcement, nothing but crickets. The Assembly committee meetings remain something that few people ever get to see.
It's going to be a very busy day for all of us.
The New York State Senate broadcasts its committee meetings online, a camera and microphones in every meeting room.
New ranking member of the Elections Committee, Senator Funke.
But here's what you get if you try to watch an Assembly committee in action. Nothing but dead air. Not 1 second of any committee meeting has been video streamed or recorded. Shot by our cameras, this is what an Assembly committee meeting looks like.
All right, we have a 4-bill agenda packed with excitement.
On this day, the Agriculture Committee is considering a bill to establish an animal abuse database. The committee chair is Donna Lepardo.
Do you think that the committee meetings should be televised or streamed online?
Oh, definitely. I think it's really important that people see the entire process from start to finish.
This is the Assembly Judiciary Committee. What the public can't see on this day is a vote on changing the law dealing with the sale of residential property. Local Assemblymember Mary Beth Walsh sits on this committee.
Should these committee meetings be live streamed?
Yeah, they should be, and it should have been done a long time ago, and it's something that my conference has been pushing for some time.
You can't see the meetings online, even though the Assembly's Rule 4, Section 2G states the audio and or video broadcast of committee meetings shall be made available on the Assembly internet site when practicable. So why isn't it happening? We went straight to the top and asked Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie.
Any thoughts of finally putting cameras in committee meetings?
We still had our review commission, and we'll still always look at ways to do improvements.
A check of the National Conference of State Legislatures website shows that most other states do broadcast their Assembly or House proceedings. Here is an April Assembly Rules Committee meeting in the state of California.
Please be advised that an audio and video recording of today's proceeding is being made and is also being televised.
The New York State Assembly does broadcast its floor sessions and some hearings, but the public remains in the dark when it comes to committee meetings, just the way it's always been.
Just a tradition over the years of this just being done privately. But I think those days are done.
We checked with the Senate about the cost of all this. A source says the cost to outfit its meeting rooms with broadcast equipment was minimal. That pales in comparison to the $7 million a year the Assembly spends on postage communicating with the public through mailers. Yet Speaker Hastie remains non-committal on the committee cameras.
Do you think the public would be better served to see what goes on in committee meetings?
I think that the more information that the public knows, the better. So we'll see what happens.
Which means for now, the Assembly Agriculture Committee has pie, but no cameras for those with an appetite for learning what goes on in these all-important meetings.
And Senate sources also tell me it was pretty easy to set up the broadcast equipment, so low cost, low effort, yet it's still not being done. You are still left in the dark. If you want to see Assembly committees in action, you'll have to quit your day job and just hang out at the Capitol. Mailers from lawmakers, straight from the Senate or Assembly offices. They fill up your mailbox. They are often chock full of photos and flattering messages about the lawmaker who sent them. But he or she didn't pay for them out of their own pocket. You did. They are taxpayer funded, and I've got the numbers. I've discovered you treated some members of the New York State Senate to a lot more mail just prior to last year's election.
The cost piles up quickly. Mailers sent out by members of the state legislature, paid for by you. In the last 6-month reporting period, from April 1 to September 30th of last year, you spent $7.7 million on postage for these mailers. $4.2 million in the Senate, $3.5 million in the Assembly. Of course, 2018 was an election year. That's why some opposing candidates and good government groups cry foul, and why Senator Neil Breslin does not spend a dime of your money on mailers.
Why don't you send out flyers?
I think it's a competitive advantage against somebody who challenges me, and I don't think that's fair.
But 13 other senators spent more than $100,000 in mailer postage in that 6-month pre-election period. Here they are. All 13 were running for re-election. The mailers often look like campaign literature, full of photos of the lawmaker in action, touting their accomplishments as they seek another term. Senator Jim Tedisco is one of those 6-figure spenders.
It does look a little bit like a campaign flyer, standing up for us. I mean, that looks like something you'd see on a campaign flyer. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, I think you'd see my picture and my name on a campaign flyer, too. Right. What am I going to say? I wasn't working for you when we passed all these things? I mean, that's ridiculous.
So that's within the bounds to tout yourself.
I wouldn't send it out if it wasn't above the bounds.
When you compare 2018, an election year, to 2017, a non-election year, there is a stark difference. Of those 13 6-figure spenders in the Senate, 12 of them spent 2 or 3 times more in the election year. For the same 6 months, April to September, Kenneth LaValle went from a mere $29,000 in 2017 to a whopping $124,000 in 2018. Elaine Phillips went from $55,000 in 2017 to $120,000 in 2018, and she lost her re-election bid.
If there's anybody who wants to cut down on the cost of communications, it's Senator Jim Tedisco.
Jim Tedisco went from $43,000 in 2017 to $113,000 in 2018. Sue Serino from Dutchess County jumped from $57,000 to $120,000, the 4th highest spender in the Senate.
Did you know you were spending more money in election years?
And I can tell you my constituents had told me that all of my mail was always informational. It was consistent. I did that from day one. Nothing changed. Didn't matter the year.
Senator Patty Ritchie from Syracuse spent $57,000 in 2017. She jumped to $105,000 in 2018. Like Serino, she defends that spending.
You know, I don't know what the total amount for the mail was. All I know is each year, as a senator, we were given an allotment, and we would decide on how best to connect with our constituents.
Some years election.
And they definitely continue connecting to your pocketbook to the tune of $7 million, as we said, in just 6 months. Now, there are rules about sending out these taxpayer-funded mailers. In the Senate, mailers have to stop 30 days before the general election. But that still gives incumbents plenty of time to use that powerful weapon to get their name and message into your home on your dime.